This is, you've seen this?
They have not seen it and don't want to give the impression that they've seen it, but the number, though, that they said that they expected to raise was expressed to me earlier.
So why don't you get a copy of this and let us know what you think, Aquarium Society? Okay? Any other questions or comments? I appreciate you breaking it down, Nick, because when I first read this, to get to 3 million, I thought it was really aggressive. This at least gives a little more flexibility. I'm not actually wed to keeping our early contributions at the 15% mark. I think that we often get our early funders, they're disproportionate to our later overall funding to jumpstart it. So I'm actually not wed to the 15%. So let's just keep talking about this, but I think you've laid out a good approach, but I want to hear from the folks. Questions or comments on this? Okay, that takes us to the Arts Action Plan. I want to tell those council members who joined us later then, our thought is to ask your indulgence to stay to talk about item 38, project liftoff, 40, relocation costs, 43, the comprehensive historic resources survey, 47, the budget legislation, and then we would not be having budget session tomorrow morning. Okay.
What was just passed out was something that Frank Video handed me an hour or so ago, which is I don't want to create confusion here. This is behind tab 33, and you'll see there's already a budget guidance statement with this exact same title in there that says Pagler. So this one is written in version 2. It's a different council number. Usually we use version numbers as one council member revises his or hers. But so this is a different, a somewhat
And it's a totally different topic, so.
different topic. So anyway, we'll try to get this straightened out so that we don't end up with two with the exact same title. So you've got one that's already in your books that says Pagler, a new one that was just passed out that says Licata.
Well, why don't we just amend the title, so we've got percent for art program guidance, Pagler, and then percent for art program guidance, Licata. And then the fact that they say two different things doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, talking about the Arts Action Plan, there's $240,000 worth of additions in the mayor's proposed budget to carry out the Arts Action Plan, a collection of miscellaneous items in support of arts functions. There's also $10,000 provided in the supplemental budget in the 1999 budget for the Arts Commission organizational review. Part of that's in the supplemental, part of it's in the 2000 budget. There's a proposed intent statement from Councilmember Licata, which asks that, or requires that of those $240,000 in items, certain ones be held and not expended until there's been a CAP committee review of those items and a council approval by resolution to release those. And the intent statement also indicates that other items out of the $240,000 in Arts Action Plan items would go forward in the budget without being held. That's the first intent statement. Second, there's a budget guidance statement from Councilmember Pagler, and this is not related to the $240,000 in items in the 2000 budget, but it's related to another aspect of the mayor's proposal for the Arts Action Plan, which is to anticipate in the next year's budget, in the 2001-2002 budget, change to the percent for art program, which would increase the percentage and apply it to projects outside the city and change the types of projects to which the percent for art would apply. This intent statement, or the budget guidance statement, would direct the executive in preparing the budget for 2001 to not extend the percent for art program to projects outside the city limits, and that any proposal to increase the percentage be accompanied by or be balanced by a demonstrated major offsetting savings in the cost of capital projects. And the final budget guidance statement is the Licata budget guidance statement, which asks the executive to extend the percent for art ordinance requirements to apply to public-private capital projects. And there's some various aspects to that here. So.
Okay, folks, want to talk about this. The first thing I would add, though, we've got a Y2K problem, Bob, with your slide, because January 99 is not going to happen. So,
There's a Y2K problem.
been there, done that, and it was a lot of fun. Okay. Margaret, you want to talk
Prescient report.
Well, do we want to say anything about, have any questions or comments about the Arts Action Plan?
Yeah,
Councilmember
comment
Cotto.
on that, unless you want to.
Councilmember
I
Conlon.
just have a very minor comment, and I want to say this very tactfully, but when we look at item number 2 there, when we talk about it being Councilmember Licata's
Yeah,
Seattle
I'm-
Neighborhood Art Celebration, it's not going to your office, so I just think we should make it clear on that.
Unless we take it out of his office.
Exactly.
I might add that this was, actually, this text here was copied from information sent from the mayor's office, so Councilmember Licata's office is not responsible for claiming this as their own.
Had I been wiser, I would have caught it and stripped it out, however. So,
Message received. Anything else?
And the other comment I want to make is I really appreciate having the funding in here for the pamphlet talking about how to run a safe live music show, because that's something we've been talking about with the Music and Youth Task Force. I think that's going to be something that's extremely useful and really is an excellent piece of work.
Councilmember Licata.
yeah, just a couple of comments. These 4 items, for going ahead with those, I just want to give a little background. On the PIO officer for SAC, they had a full-time officer there 3 years ago, and then it was cut back the last time we had a budget cut back. So it's reestablishing a position that had been in the commission right along. So in some ways, one may view it as reestablishing a full-time position that had been there. In talking with the commission director and asking her if in fact how much this position was needed, pointing out that they have been receiving, because of the heightened attention also to Hearts in the City, increased number of phone calls and demand on the commission. And as a result, there has been a noticeable lag time in getting back to artists, trying to assist with them as well as the general public. The Mayor's Arts Task Force did identify a full-time artist liaison, so to an extent, this is meeting that objective as well, although it's not actually filling that role exactly, but it's certainly contributing towards it. In the second, on supporting community forums, this is something that they have laid out a strategy of doing about 4 a year. This is, again, one of the items that came out of the Mayor's Task Force. This is something that would, in fact, allow for greater access to the Seattle Arts Commission that they feel that would make it more efficient and be able to identify also where they can better get matching funds where possible for individual artists or arts organizations. And the last 2 items are the Building 30 and Building 18 at Sandpoint. These feasibility studies are part of the Sandpoint Physical Development Management Plan, so it's, in some ways, it really blends over to the longer-range development plans for Sandpoint, now called Magnuson Park, rather than strictly being an arts item, but they are looking at these buildings as opportunities for possibly arts studio space or live-in space. The one is a very large hangar. You might have been there before for the library's book sale. They've used that facility, but it also has office space there. So there's an opportunity to use it for both an active work, artist space, as well as smaller, perhaps, artist use. One of the critical elements that came out of the Blue Ribbon Task Force is trying to think of activities that could occur within the existing buildings that could draw public to Sandpoint. And these were very high on the Blue Ribbon Committee's radar screen for kinds of activities they'd like to see. So this is very much in line with the recommendations that came out of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Building 18 is a historic fire building there. And again, the funds would be used to, for the same general purposes, to see how to increase the pedestrian traffic and people staying on the Sandpoint campus in a working relationship with the buildings and with the community.
Questions from council members? I have a question. Actually, I don't mean to put Councilmember Steinberg on the spot, but this is something I've never figured out in 10 years that I've been here. Why does it take so much money to think about things, you know? I mean, it says we want to convert Building 30 to studio spaces, so why don't we just do it? You know, or convert Building 18 to studio spaces? Let's just do it. You know, so I guess I need to know what is the value added with these sorts of things, and is there a way to minimize this sort of thing? If you know you want to do these things, how can you move into them without spending a whole bunch of money on studies and thinking? I do agree you should look before you leap, but, you know, I'm really interested in how we move these things forward and don't spend inappropriate dollars at the front end, just kind of on scenarios and options, and, you know, we just got to get some of this stuff done.
Have you remodeled your house without a design in advance? You know how crazy that can be, especially an older house. These buildings weren't designed for this purpose. And they may not meet code, they may not have the infrastructure, the utilities. They may need modification. So it's my understanding, this is
Money well
a
spent.
study, this is to adapt those buildings to a change use for a specific purpose, and it's not that large a sum of money, actually. Do you happen to know, Nick, how large these buildings are, what the square footage?
Well, the Building 30 must be minimum 50,000, if not greater
Yeah,
than that.
so they're not small buildings, and I think we could get more specific so that we're getting a real work product
That's-
out of it, rather
that'd be
than
helpful.
just some, useless study and I think we should, because it should be a big step toward converting the buildings that is providing the legwork and what, in terms of what needs to change physically and how money needs to be spent on those buildings to accommodate the new use.
But before you do that, have you done your pre-development work?
I'm not running this, no. No, I'm not in the
I mean, I was
design
willing to
business
accept this was
anymore.
pre-development work costs, not,
And I just want to make sure, I think a lot of what Councilmember Steinberg is talking about is what I would like to see incorporated, because I want to make sure that the money spent is the same as that if you did the whole project and you step back, and this was step one, that you've actually made a dent in the total project cost, and you
Right,
actually have a
that's fair.
product
I guess
that
the
moves
question I
along.
was saying is if there's an environmental phase 2 done, it's gonna cost you $30,000. Now, I don't know whether they stored gas in the hangar or not, but one of the things we might be interested in knowing is what's in the soil. And environmental analysis certainly will do that. Phase 1 will tell you if you ought to look any further. Phase 2 will probably cost $30,000 to find out what's there. So I'm just suggesting, these are the kinds of pre-development costs that go in.
Well, I have to say, with 10 years of being on Sandpoint, I think we've done a lot on the
Okay.
soils. I think there's a lot of good
Well,
work. But I just want to make sure we're getting,
I think
that
we
this is a good
should
value.
ask for more information, a scope of work, and to
And
see that
define
this is leading
Right.
toward, what our goals are here.
I just want to make sure it's a good value,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah,
we're really being,
I think those points are well taken. I should point out that the Building 30, if you look, is actually a schematic design, and Building 18 is the feasibility. And the reason for that is that the feasibility has already been done for Building 30. TL and Solid did a feasibility study for Building 30, and she determined that it was feasible to go ahead and use the space. So they've done the first step. That's why the schematic design for Building 30 is to actually do, I think, what you were addressing, Councilmember Donald, is how do you divide it up and how do we actually get
Right.
forward? The fire station is more on the preliminary because it's more challenging, so and that's why also the amount is smaller. It's just a feasibility study. Is this something we want to go forward and do? Can we go on to the next step?
I can bring back more information for a second round describing the Building 18 feasibility study.
and maybe these, and maybe it's $10,000 to do a feasibility study, or maybe it's $5,000. I don't know, but I just want to make sure we're getting good value for a strong product, and I just want to just move these things along. Okay. Other questions or comments about this? Great, thanks, Bob.
I guess I do, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Councilmember Pager, sure.
I can't just tell from looking at this how many of these are ongoing costs and how many of them are one-time. And so if we could have that information back, it would be helpful.
And also, Bob, since we're adding more things for you to look into, I'm a little curious as to why the arts organizational study isn't part of their current budget. I mean, their current budget, they do studies, they do various things. And I guess, for me, it's a question of making choices, and I'm not sure that we need an increment to do that. I think we need to know what else they're doing and whether this is, what kind of priority this is with regard to the other studies they're doing this year. We don't need to always keep adding. We actually finish things, and there's probably things in their budget that they finish. So I just think we need to be slow to keep adding things sometimes.
It's a good point. We should look into that and get them to respond.
So I'm not against it, I just need to know what
No,
we're
I think that's
buying
good.
in exchange.
And that's one of the items that would be held pending the CAP committee review of.
Yeah, just a clarification, these top items would be held,
No, not
and we would not release them until we
Not the 10,000.
get additional information.
And we'll bring that back anyway for the seminar.
Great.
I'd just like to point out a minor detail in the table, second row, instead of ESD, it should be Department of Information Technology. It's just a minor detail.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Donnie. Other questions or comments? Okay. Councilmember Pagler, do you want to speak to your insect?
Yeah. The mayor's proposing in the 2001-2002 budget to make some recommendations with respect to changing the percent for art program. To the extent that council has a position, a majority position on any of these, and we can tell the mayor in advance, I think we should do so and not have to back things out of the budget later. And this budget guidance statement actually addresses two separate issues. And then Councilmember Licata's addresses a third. And there's a number of components to the mayor's proposal. There's a fourth, as I understand it, that we don't have any guidance in here about, and that is what kinds of projects the 1% should fund. But in any event, mine addresses two issues. One is extending the percent for art program to projects outside the city limits. And I'm asking council members to support saying that should not happen. That essentially is a charge on Seattle City Light and the Seattle Water Department or Water Fund, as those are the two funds that have significant projects outside the city. And this is just one of those cases of piling on the utilities with some of these costs. And I think the utilities are good at actually incorporating art in their projects outside the city limits, but having a requirement adds to the cost, the capital costs of programs that right now we're talking about 19% rate increase for water. And then the second part of that is to ask that when a proposal comes back to increase from 1% to 1.5%, which is apparently the mayor's proposal, the percent for art programs on capital budgets within the city, that the mayor present information that demonstrates major offsetting costs, offsetting savings in the cost of capital projects. I think we've all been working to try to get the overhead costs of capital projects down. There's always new values that we can add to our and hang on to our capital projects. And let's start disciplining ourselves to make sure we're taking something off when we put something on.
Councilmember Steinbrook?
Well, I have some questions about this, and I will say that I in no way perceive this to be a raid on utilities, quote unquote, but producing good public works projects, whether they're in Seattle or not, and integrating art into those public works projects as a public purpose that is served. So I just don't view it philosophically in the same way that Councilmember Pagler does. But I would like to know what the potential impact would be to the ratepayers, first of all, if we did this, if that can be estimated. I think it's
and her failed marriage and other relationships that were also failed relationships, maybe Edith Wharton really didn't understand the men in her life. And maybe that's why her women do come across so well. Because she does understand her own dilemmas so well. And she understands the dilemmas of other women like her. And she understands that you make moral choices and you pay.
Yes, and one of the things that this book shows so well is that fatal descent into really finally the end, that cataclysmic ending by one choice. You make a little choice here and a little choice there and a little choice there, and then you descend into that heart of darkness.
Right. It is kind of like watching somebody drown very slowly.
Yes.
You just see it, you just see her sinking.
Yes.
And that is the tragic part of the book. I also love in this book the incredibly intricate class system and the knowing what to do and where to go. And I mean, I'd just be exhausted if I were I couldn't keep up with it. But does that transcend? I mean, we're talking about novels transcending. Does that still transcend in this day? The aspect of class that she talks about, does that still speak to us today? The struggle to attain certain class?
Well, certainly not in the same way that it did then, but I think people struggle to attain money, which doesn't come with class necessarily. I mean, I think she would say, I think Edith Wharton would look down on the nouveau riche of Seattle as much as she did the nouveau riche of New York. But again, I think that the book is more than just about class, but it's a commentary on the way we have arranged our society, I think. And it's different. It's a different arrangement now, but I think the same ideas pertain.
Right.
I think you're right. She's talking about an arranged world, and we have a very clearly arranged world. Perhaps not so obvious here in Seattle as, say, New York or Boston still, but I was someplace not long ago, and people were asking whether or not we were natives, and the room had actually surprisingly several native Seattleites, and the question was, where did you go to school? And somebody who said that they went to Lakeside, charming woman, said she'd gone to Lakeside, got a very different response than a woman who said she'd gone to Franklin. And in as much as, saying that the Van Alstynes, for example, in this novel, puts you in a very specific category. Saying that you went to Franklin puts you in a very different category and with a very different set of expectations than saying that you went to Lakeside. Both of which are wonderful schools, by the way. I have no feeling one way or the other about which is better. And I think we're more subtle about it, and I think it may be that style is the new sort of thing. Whether or not you sag far enough, or whether or not you're wearing Tommy Hilfiger or Gap or Escada, who I think has just recently come to Seattle. I think the measurements are different, but they're still there.
Right.
And certainly having taught kids, the measurements are so there. There is this is such a fun book, I think, in many ways for high schoolers, because the class system is so there in high school, so there in college.
They can really relate to it.
And they can read it like that. They can read it as quickly as the Dorsets could tell that they were not, that they were climbing up.
That's great. So again, would you recommend this book for individuals or for book groups to read together?
I would absolutely, and I would say that I hope that this would just be the first of many Edith Whartons, that they would go from here to the Age of Innocence and the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the first Edith Wharton novel that I would recommend to a book group, but I certainly would recommend it. Perhaps a couple of others. I think Buccaneers first. We've talked about this before. I think Buccaneers maybe first, something with a straighter plot line. And and that whole sort of denouement with Selden at the end, needs to be read a couple of times to realize exactly what she did. And I don't know, I think I might pick something that had a little clearer plot line to start with.
Could be.
And maybe a little happier ending to start with. and then go to this.
Well, one of the interesting things is that Edith Wharton had a wonderful sense of humor, and reading her short stories, particularly a short story called Zingu, which is about a woman's discussion group. You must go out and read this short story, because it is a delight. And I just think, again, has all sorts of relevance to the way we're living today. But it has all of her characteristics and a sense of humor.
You know, this brings me back to something that we started the whole thing with about reading the classics. You know, it's not a surprise to me that Heart of Darkness was remade into Apocalypse Now, although I admit I haven't seen the movie, or that Edith Wharton has become a popular movie topic, or E.M. Forster particularly, which I think is just amazing to me, has become. You know, movies may be the way that we're revisiting these classics so that they become reread. You know, the themes are there, the stories are there, and maybe it's, you know, these movies are successful. They're, you know, and they're sometimes pale approximations of the novels.
Right.
But nonetheless, the themes are there. There's an attempt at building that sort of character, and I find that really exciting. And you know, as you say, would you recommend this to a book group? And I think, you know, they're making movies about these books.
Right. Well, House of Mirth, there was a new one
exactly.
coming out of House
If they're making movies,
right.
you know,
Then it's gonna be
these are
generally-
revisitable.
Right.
You know, these
Right.
have broad enough themes, big enough characters, settings that are appreciable, that we should be revisiting them.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, that's our topics about discussion of classics. Thank you so much for your comments. Another wonderful way to discover the classics. Thank you so much. We'll be back in just a moment, and we'll be talking about the books we'd recommend for your reading shelf this month. We're back for the end of Book Talk, and we'll just briefly talk about the other books that we've been reading this month. Nancy, let's start with you. What's been on your book shelf this month?
High on my list of favorites this month is a wonderful collection of short stories by psychotherapist and novelist Amy Bloom, and it's a collection called A Blind Man Can See How Much I Love You, which, in addition to its wonderful title, I think is filled with the most generous views of human beings in all of their differences, in the ways that love transforms people, in different kinds of love. The first story, which is perhaps the strongest, although I think there are many strong stories in the collection, is about a woman whose 20-year-old daughter is having a sex change operation. And this is the mother's thoughts about that, what that means to her as a mother, to have a little girl, have a daughter who from the time she was 3 years old knew that she should have been born a boy. I just think that this is a generous, loving collection of short stories, and I felt that it was really life transforming without being at all didactic or preachy. These are just heartwarming short stories about love and the
She's an
different
amazing
ways.
woman.
Absolutely.
Good. Mark, what have you been reading this month?
Well, a friend went to China, and it sort of made me think about Chinese novels all over again, because I think we all know the Japanese novels better. And then, you know, that wonderful Chinese author whose book I admit I haven't read. Maybe you have.
No, I haven't.
I don't know that it's come out in translation.
Only in Australia.
Off to the Olympics. You know, when the Nobel Prize, and I thought, my God, you know, time to get reacquainted with Chinese literature. And so a book that's been out for a couple of hundred years, actually. I mean, it's in China, it's a classic. The Story of the Stone, which I think was translated into English for many, many years as The Dream of the Red Room, or The Dream of the Red Chamber.
Right.
By Cao Shi-Quinn. It's an amazing book. It's kind of like the Forsyth Saga goes to China. I mean, it's a wonderful story about a family, actually a series of families, and it also takes them down the path. And I guess there are more novels to come, which I'm really quite excited. I didn't want to let them go yet. Really, really excited about that novel. It gave me a sense of a China that does not exist anymore, and yet again the themes about family and obligation and morality and the state are all there. I think it reads really, really well. It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Great.
Cao Shi-Quinn.
Good. And I've been reading this month Drowning Ruth by Christina Schwartz, which is a fascinating tale, and it's now an Oprah book club, so I will endorse it as well here on our book talk show. But it's a wonderful book about two sisters and family secrets, and they're coming together in a kind of a tragic end. But once again, a good story about family, and I think that makes for wonderful, wonderful novels. So Drowning Ruth by Christina Schwartz. I'd like to thank all of my panelists today for being with me on Book Talk. Nancy Pearl from the Seattle Public Library, Mark Kernigan, avid